So in this video I'm going to walk you through the flow I've used to initiate a GSLB failover on a NetScaler using NITRO and how the checks are done into the data center to make sure both your GSLB sites are available. So as you can see, there's a Octoblu flow with a name and a bit of a description on there. The first thing in the flow is a trigger. It's a standard trigger. There's nothing flash about it. What I would recommend doing here, rather than a normal trigger, is put a schedule so it tests this every 5 minutes or however fast you want the failover to occur. Next are two variables that get set initially to mark site A and site B as being down. Then moving on, there's an HTTP GET thing or tool to query the URL for each of your individual services. So you will need a general GSLB DNS name and an individual name for each site, and these are the ones that we test using the HTTP GET thing in Octoblu. Moving on from there, once the HTTP GET has happened and is successful, it sets the variable that we created earlier to yes. What's going to happen here is if the HTTP GET fails, that flow chain is going to stop there, and therefore the variable for that site won't be get set to yes. But then chaining out of each of those objects, it goes to get the status of both sites. That means if an individual site fails, the flow will still be able to get the status of both sites, one being up and one being down. This just sets a key to a variable as site A up and site B up. So moving into the compose tool, you'll have the status of both of your individual data centers. This gets the message from the variable and puts it into a key, which we can then use in the function to determine whether a site is up or down. This just pauses the flow for 5 seconds. This is just to let any of the individual chains going into the compose message catch up. Moving from here, we execute a function, and this is literally just to set a site A active or a site B active variable within the message payload to yes or no, and this will then get passed into the PowerShell. You can see here that the key corresponds to the variable we're querying in the function. Once that message is returned, we then hand it over to the shell thing, and you can see we've set two environment variables up on the shell thing to take the site A active and the site B active part of the payload and push it into a environment variable called site A and site B that we can then read into the script using PowerShell. So the next line of the script, we import our NetScaler management module. So if I check on the machine where the Octoblu shell connector is installed, you can see the management PS1 file is in that directory that we import. Then we call the function Octoblu GSLB failover, passing in the variable for site A and site B, which is a yes or no up down variable, then the GSLB service bound to site A. So if we check on the NetScaler here, you can see that site A is the GSLB service name that I've bound to the virtual server in site A. Site B and the NSIP. So site B is the GSLB service bound to site B. And if we ping NS, you can see that the NetScaler IP is .201. And this is the NetScaler that hosts the GSLB virtual servers. So if I just look at GSLB, make sure it's all working prior to running the script, You can see the primary site is site A, and that's got that service bound. The domain binding is GSLB octoblu.bretty.me.uk, and the backup virtual server for this vServer is the failover. And you can see in the failover virtual server we've bound the site B service. So we'll just quickly test. If I ping the GSLB domain name, you can see it's responding with .230, which is the primary service name and IP address. If I disable the primary service, wait for that to go out of service, and then re-ping the domain name, we get the response from the backup vServer in data center B. So I'll just bring that back online. You see there it's failed back to data center A. So if we now run the Octoblu flow, this is going to be monitoring site A and site B, and currently both sites are up and running. So we need to simulate a internet connectivity failure in site A. So if I disable the firewall rule allowing internet access into data center A or site A, as you can see, as far as the NetScaler is concerned, because it's monitoring its own services, that GSLB service is still up and it's still responding with the IP address for the GSLB service in site A. So if that was given back to a user, they would then try and connect into the GSLB service hosted out of site A, and this obviously would fail as there's no inbound internet connection into that site. So even though the user has the IP address for site A, there's no connectivity. So what we need at Octoblu to do is force disable that GSLB service to fail over on the NetScaler. So if we trigger the flow here, we've set both variables to being down. Now the flow currently is trying to do a HTTP GET to both site A and site B. This will take a little while as it needs to time out on site A for the flow to carry on. So you can see there we've got the failure in site A, site B is carried on, and it's got the status of both site A and site B because of that link into both site status variables from the HTTP GET. It pauses for 5 seconds and then executes the function to check and set the variables of the state of the sites, passes that into the Octoblu NITRO script, and then runs that on the connector. So if we check now on our NetScaler, you can see that Octoblu has picked up that the internet connectivity to site A is down and it's disabled the service for site A. So if we ping the GSLB domain name, that's now failed over to data center 2, and you can see there the standard out. Sorry about that. The standard out message is telling you that it's bound the force down monitor to that GSLB service. So if we check the service, you can see it's put a monitor onto that service that's intended to fail. So that will force that GSLB service down and therefore cause a data center failover. So if we now simulate the internet connectivity coming back to site A, and we can now test connectivity into that data center. You can see there that the service is now available from site A. As far as the NetScaler is concerned, site A is still down. So if we re-trigger that Octoblu script, it's again going to set both variables and then do an HTTP GET to both site A and site B. Once that's done, it will get the status of both sites, pass that into the compose thing, execute the function, then hand that over to PowerShell to trigger the NITRO commands on the NetScaler. So you can see in the standard out there it says the force down monitor has been removed because it's picked both GSLB sites as being up. If we refresh, you can see that site A is now enabled and GSLB has failed over back to the primary site. And that's how to manage and monitor Internet GSLB using Octoblu, PowerShell and the NITRO commands. Thanks very much.